steering capabilities of these machines and complex mechanism to make them fly is remarkable, and you really don't expect that from ancient texts.
We're going to come back with you, Nassim, in just a moment on Coast to Coast AM. And by the way, Webmaster Lex has posted on our Twitter feed at coasttocoastam.com pictures, a link of that UFO sun. Pretty amazing stuff, actually. Pretty amazing indeed. And, you can go over there and become one of our Twitter friends. So just get up there to coasttocoastam.com. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Are you a Streamlink member? Well, you can be for just pennies a day. Simply go to coasttocoastam.com. You can get podcasts, past archives, 3 years right now, going back even further, iPhone apps, and some other little things that you'll have some fun. It's just a neat way to be part of Coast to Coast AM, and I think it's just really pennies a day. We'll be back in a moment with physicist Nassim Haramein on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie with physicist Nassim Haramein. Nassim, last night, Coast to Coast guest Richard Hoagland, who's a regular contributor and our science advisor as well, heads up the enterprisemission.com.
Yes.
He claimed that spiral in Norway was the remnants of fuel from a captured Russian missile that he believes a shadow government, I'm going to use that a shadow government has incredible technology that could down a missile, capture it, that they wanted the world to really know what they were doing and the clout they did have. What are your thoughts on that thing?
Well, that's very interesting. I hadn't heard that one, but I don't know. It's a very difficult analysis. There's so much information out there, and when we look at the footage and the information that's available, it's a very difficult thing to decipher and to try to come to a positive, deterministic conclusion. However, I tend towards, from the analysis I've made, from the studies I've done, and from my understanding of certain levels of technologies that we have, that most likely the phenomenon that's seen over Norway is the result of a ground facility that has an array of antennas, best known as the HARP.
Know it well. The one in Alaska, and there's also one out that area, right?
That's right. There's one right near that area, ionic atmospheric heating facility. And, when you look at the footage, you look at the rotational dynamics of these spirals and the dynamics you see that seem to go to a ground effect. And, and then as well, there's all sorts of information that supports that. For instance, large surges in their power consumption during that time, during that night. Those plots are available and so on from that facility. And various effects that were observed from other HARP phenomena prior to this incident that were very similar effect. I think that it all starts to add up, and it's pretty conclusive. But there's no way that we can absolutely say what, in my case anyway, what has happened there. But I think it all points to that direction, and in one way, I'm a little, it's kind of a pinch in the heart if this is what is happened there, because I think that when the spiral finally dissipates and it opens in what people call a black hole, and, because I do black hole physics and I deal with all this, I got a lot of emails. A black hole occurred over Norway and all this. And when I looked at it, and knowing what these devices do to the ionosphere, I believe that the dissipation that occurred when the black hole opened is actually a hole being poked in our ionosphere. And that's why the energy actually dissipated.
What about CERN? CERN's been active lately. Is it possible something's going wrong there?
It's you mean the Hadron Collider?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's been a very difficult project. It's been plagued with difficulties from the beginning. It's a very highly powerful accelerator. I'm actually surprised that not all of Europe dims when they turn that thing on. But, it is a very difficult thing to do, what they're trying to do there. And so they've had various difficulties every time they turn it on. There's various things that happen that makes it impossible for them to finish the tests. So, the energy levels, I think, are higher than what was anticipated. So, for instance, in the first instance, some of the anchors that held some of the magnetic coils ripped out, and some of the parts went flying through the accelerator and damaged the detectors and so on. And so there's been problems all over this experiment.
Bird drop bread in there and everything else.
Yes, that's right. So there's been difficulties, but I think we're getting there slowly but surely. I believe that what they're going to find is going to be quite unusual, that they're going to be quite surprised at what they find there, and that we're going to learn a whole lot about a whole new level of physics from these experiments.
As long as they don't create a black hole on us, Nassim.
Well, you see, my theory, George, says that every atom is already a mini black hole.
Yeah.
So, I'm not too worried about it. The geometry of the experiment, the dynamics they're using, if they create anything close to what I believe is a singularity, which is basically an atom, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah.
I think that it's going to be short-lived and dissipate quite fast because the geometry is not quite right.
Well, Nassim, what do you think is really happening with HARP? I mean, what are they doing over there with these things?
Well, it's hard to say. HARP has been a project that has been ongoing for a fairly long time now. There's obviously facilities in many different countries around the world, and there is, what are they using HARP to do is difficult to answer. Most people are not privy to this level of information, and but people ask me, well, if you believe they're poking holes in the ionosphere, why would they be doing that? Is it just because they want to demonstrate their power or so on? I believe, and at the end of the day, and this is really, again, an opinion and a conclusion I've come to just because, from the studies I've made, maybe our governments are trying to reduce global heating by, removing some of the blanketing that our ionosphere produces.
Because this thing must be on 24/7. They must have the switch on all the time.
Well, it's hard to say, but certainly, that could be a reason why they're poking holes and trying to allow some of the heat to escape. So there might be humanitarian reasons.
Absolutely. We've had Nick Begich on the program, who was one of the first to publicize HARP, which stands for the High Frequency Active Oral Research Program. And what they say on their own website is that it's a scientific endeavor aimed at studying the properties and behavior of the ionosphere with an emphasis on understanding and enhancing communications and surveillance systems for civilian and defense purposes. Now, what the heck does that mean?
Well, there's many reasons why you would want to bulge the ionosphere and be able to control one of those bulges. For instance, it would provide you a means to communicate across the horizon, meaning that instead of bouncing a signal across to a satellite, which is a weak link in the defense system, and then bouncing it back further across the horizon on the Earth, if you could bulge the ionosphere in such a way that you can use it as a reflective lens to send a signal across the ionosphere, across the atmosphere, and across the horizon, then, it would be an advantageous device for communication.